Welcome back to another episode of Survivor Worldwide on Reality Pop. We're doing an interview today with Laetitia and our retrospective all in one. Laetitia, how are you today?
Freezing. It's cold. The first cold front hit South Africa or Joburg, and these old bones are creaking and it's sore. But like I told you now, gin and tonic helps to warm you up. So be good to go.
Yeah, you've got your gin and tonic. I've got my coffee here to wake up in the morning because it's opposite sides of the world, so opposite time zones for us. But I hear about the cold. New Zealand's getting really freezing around this time of the year as well. I always feel very sorry for the South African rugby team when they have to come and play on this side because I don't think they're used to the New Zealand winters, to be honest with you.
We are strong people. A little bit of cold doesn't put us off. So don't come with excuses. We are strong people. Okay. Viva
Oh,
rugby.
100%. Hey, I'm still I've lived in New Zealand for 13 years, but if you jump onto any of my social media and that, you'll see I always wear the Springbok jersey. Even if I've been here for 13 years, I still have to support the Boks. You know, it's the team I watched with my dad growing up in Newlands in Cape Town. So I support them all the way. Even those big trouncings that we sometimes get when we come over here and we don't do too well, I'm still proudly there with my Springbok jersey. Now let's make it a bit about Survivor here, Laetitia. How did you decide to play Survivor? Were you a fan of the show prior to getting on it?
I love watching Survivor, but I'm not like the other guys that can tell you the seasons and the players and the winners. I park myself on the couch with my feet up and I watch it and I always think, yeah, but I can do this and I can do that. And then with the last one, when it ended, I was lying back and I said, do you think I can enter? My friend said, yes, go for it. So the next day I went to work. I filled in the questions, posted it, left it, never thought of anything about it. And the next day I got an email back that I had to answer more questions. And as it carried on, I went to my boss and I said, listen, I entered Survivor. And if I do make it, it's about 3 months away. She said, oh, Laetitia, don't worry, you know what, just do it. It's for fun. And as it progressed and it carried on and on, I told my eldest daughter I entered Survivor and she said, oh, yeah, Ma, but remember you're old and enjoy it. And then we had a family crisis. And by then I was quite into the Survivor thing, and I've done the medical and the psych test and everything. And we had to drive down to Durban, and we sat in the car, and the stress in that car, and just the upset that you could cut with a knife. And I said to my kids, it was my 3 boys, now my 2 boys and my 2 girls, I said, you know what, guys, I entered Survivor, and I think I'm actually going to make it. And let me tell you, from about Harrismith right down to Durban, my clothes, my wardrobe, my speech, my fitness, my diet, everything was planned. I sat back and I closed my eyes and I slept. So my sister got married in Cape Town and we were on the way to the wedding and my phone rang and I saw SA Survivor and I just switched it off. And that was in December. And it rang again and I answered and I said, yes. And they said, are you Laetitia? I said, yes. And I said, well, congratulations, you made it to Survivor. And I'm sitting at the car with everybody that doesn't know that I entered. So I said, oh, that's very nice. Thank you very much. But I went white and I was shaking. And my friend realized, wait, no, this is serious news. And right after the wedding, I went to my sister, Elizabeth and Kevin, and I said, you know what? I entered Survivor. And they said, yes. I said, well, I made it. And their faces was absolutely classic. Found my kids. My girls was there. They were ecstatic. And I found my boys that was playing water polo. And I said to them, I need to say something to you on speakerphone. So just get away. And their reaction is, of course, oh my, my normal word that I use, Ma, do they know what they've done to themselves? It'll never be the same again. And that was me. So am I a Survivor fanatic? I love watching it. I make comments. I tell them who's a doofus, who's stupid, who could do this, who could do that. And when it's over, it's over. Then I wait for the next season. I'm not a fanatical person watching it and analyzing it and thinking. I just love watching it. That's all.
Yeah. So what made you decide to play the show? What sort of drew you to playing Survivor?
I thought it would be fun. With all these water challenges. For me, it was the challenges. Go and do the challenges. It really looked like fun. You go and you do the challenges, you go back, you sit on the beach, you lounge around. Working as a nursing assistant for the last 40 years, I thought, what a wonderful way to spend a few days on a beach. Beautiful. I love the sea. I love the water. It can only be fun. I didn't really think I'm going to go out there and suffer. I thought it was going to be a fantastic time. I mean, it was a fantastic time, but it was also absolutely a horrible time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot tougher than what people think it is, and I think that there's still a lot of people around the world that, for some other reason, think that Survivor is fake, and that people go out there and they get, chocolate bars behind the scenes, Kit Kats, and all these kind of things to keep them fed while they're playing the game. But like you said, it's the real deal when you're out there. So, what was the toughest part for you of playing the game? What was the toughest part being out there?
The rain, that first 7 to 9 days of constant rain. The hunger didn't bug me at all, because when we first got to Samoa, we were in isolation for about 7 days, where they checked everything and sorted everything out and made sure everybody was fine. And I think with the other people ate as much as they could, I started cutting back on my food and I just drank water. So the hunger wasn't that such a big a deal. But sitting in that shelter and you do not have a dry piece of clothes on you, and it was just cold, and you actually sit, you can hear this storm coming on over the sea, and in the next 3-4 minutes you're going to be soaking wet, and you just never got dry. You never had dry clothes. You just had no warmth. And me being in Lomain, the first tribe, I was the Outani, I was the old auntie, and the young group all huddled together and kept each other warm, where I was alone, because I did a 360 turn on my personality, where I'm a big mouth, and I am outspoken, and I am out with people, so I can sometimes be very intimidating. I reverted to being this shy, quiet old auntie sitting there. So I was almost separated from where Rocco would say, "Come and sit next to me, keep me warm," and do things like that. The rest of the team will huddle together and keep each other warm, and I was just cold. That was horrible.
Mm. And I want to ask you more about your relationship with Rocco in a little bit, but I'm going to backtrack a little bit to when you started the game here, because early on, obviously, Rocco, he gets chosen to be the captain for your tribe, but being the strong person, and he calls you out to be the potential weak link there in the tribe. And because of that, you end up having to lead the tribe in that first challenge. Talk us through your first thoughts when you were sort of selected there as the weakest person in your tribe, and having to step up. What was that like, having to step up and lead your tribe in that first challenge?
For me, it was, in Afrikaans, you say, kry vir jou. You deserve it, because
Karma.
yeah, karma, Mrs. Karma, she's a bitch sometimes, boy. She's a bitch. For me, I looked forward to it, because I've got 5 kids, so screaming at people is quite natural. And going up there, I thought, I can do that. But in a way, you look at the other people and you scream and you shout. And where Rose Lee and Mike was doing their thing and they were carrying on, they listened. The other people just didn't listen. They wanted to go their own direction, and the one lot nearly walked into the ocean. Luckily, not my team. But when they came back and Dura had to put the food on the mat that we had to pull up, he overturned the whole bag of rice. And I was screaming at him, there's use your brains. You can feel it's a bag of rice. But, there's so much screaming going on. But it wasn't difficult, because they listened and we did well. And at least I could show them I'm not timid. I can climb up that thing, stand there, scream, and do my thing. So I felt more or less, we got together, we got some food, we got a little bit of rice, so off we go. Even though they said I was the oldest, Rocco came to me afterwards, and I think he apologized about 10 times, because his mother's name is also Laetitia and spelled exactly the same way as my name. So he saw me as his mom, and he protected me to the T in such a way that I couldn't really go and do challenges the way I wanted to do it, because he wanted to keep me safe, which I appreciated, because it made me less vulnerable and less a spot on my back. But I knew that if we were going to go to trial, I would be voted out, because Rose Lee and Mabar and Jeff and Mike was very close, and they were going to vote me out because they saw me as the weakest person. I mean, I was the weakest person there when it comes to physical challenges. But for me, Survivor is not about the physical challenge. Only one person can win that challenge. Your challenge comes when you go back to the camp and you're wet and you're cold and it rains and there's no food. Your emotional, mental stamina needs to be much more stronger than going into a physical challenge and win it. I knew I was never going to win a challenge, but to go back and be emotionally strong and to be mentally strong was more important for me at that stage, and that was going to be my strategy right through the game.
Mm. Now, you mentioned here that Rocco sort of protected you early in the game, and he saw you like a mother figure out there. And one of the, I think the really golden nuggets here for anybody listening is the fact that you. I always say that you should play into the perceptions of what people have of you in a show like Survivor. And you mentioned that you had to change your personality and become that mother figure, someone that potentially weren't always as opinionated early in the game. I'm really interested about the relationship with Rocco, because obviously later on when you guys get into your second swap, Rocco falls outside of the numbers and you end up having to vote against him. How difficult was it for you at that point to turn your back on Rocco after you've worked with him to a certain degree up until that point? Was it something that came very difficult? Did you try and save him, or was there just no opportunity to change the vote at that point?
At that point, nobody was interested in changing it, and Rocco was a huge threat. I mean, he was like Rob said, he was Superman. He was absolutely muscles and strength and brute, and he doesn't lose a challenge. I mean, he would put every last effort into it. So yes, it was very sad to vote out, but for me at that stage to be able to progress into the challenges and to show what I actually can do, I had to vote him out, and we spoke afterwards, and everything was fine. He understands it was a game, so we had to play that. And I still follow him on Instagram, watch him out. I hope he's going to do well in his sport, and he's a fantastic guy. He's an absolute fantastic guy, soft-hearted, honest, open, and he really looked out for me and looked after me the whole time while we were together.
No, that's great, and I'm really interested when you get into that sort of 7-person alliance there after that second swap. Who were the people within that alliance that very early on you gravitated towards, and you thought these are my people within the 7 that I'm going to work with long term when that was sort of first created?
Okay, in the second swap, Rob and Steffi came in, and we
Yes.
started becoming friends, and Rob and I became friends. And what people don't see, it is so true that if you don't talk in front of the camera, the people don't see it. And this may be one of the mistakes that I made, but I had a very good relationship with Dante. And if you look at the votes, if I made a promise to you, I kept it. So I never voted for Kobus. I never voted for Dante. And Dante's the one when I nearly had that breakdown and I said, listen, guys, I want out because my leg is absolutely in agony. He said to me, Laetitia, you can win this thing. Mike said, yeah, stand up in public and say you want out. Dante said, don't you dare do that. You can actually win it. But I made a very early pact with Rob and with Steffi, and nobody knew it. And we didn't have our discussions in the bushes. I never go into the bushes. Like I said, I don't do bush babies or bush hunting. And at night when we used to be sleeping, it would be Kobus and then me, then Rob, and then Steffi, and then Nicole. And that's where we did all our discussions. And I gave my feedback to Rob and spoke to Steffi. And Steffi and I was very close. And even in that the one challenge where we had to stand and hold and the paint fell on my head within, I think, 1.5 seconds. That must be a record to survive. I'm sure I must have some record. And at one stage, she said, must I give up? And I said, don't you dare give up. And I just sat there and talking to her the whole time and give her some inspiration and say, you can do it. And just, we've got a very close friendship. And even up to today, I still chat to her and we encourage each other. And I know what she's doing. And she's like they say, she's a brute force, but she's an amazing woman. She's an amazing friend to have.
So
And
for me, it's funny you mentioned Steffi, because I think that I don't know what the social media hype was at the time that the season was playing in South Africa, because obviously even when I saw it the first time, I was watching it I think after the whole season aired, and this is now my second time watching it, and first time really analyzing it, but I always liked Steffi from the start. I think that it's really important to have strong women on a show like Survivor, and I feel like she is one of those. She spoke her mind. People may or may not agree with everything that she said at times, but I really appreciate people that are real, and I feel like she's a very real person, and you can't blame her for trying to win the game. Now, you and Steffi had a plan towards the end of the game to bring in Nicole to try and vote out Rob. So let's start with the first thing here. I want to set the record straight. In your mind, if Nicole, if Rob did not win that specific immunity, do you think that Nicole would have followed through with a plan to go against them? And do you think that she changed her plan there at the end because obviously Rob won the immunity and she was scared that he was going to find out and then she's out next? Do you think that that was a legitimate plan? Because from what I saw in the edit, it looked like she was going to cut him.
It's in the final one, the day before that I got voted out, I sat down with Rob and I said to him, this is now the third time that Nicole is putting the wool over your eyes. You don't see it. With our second swap, Nicole was with us. And no, sorry, it was the third swap when she came in. And that was after she voted one of the amigos out. And she realized that we're actually going to go vote her out. And she came to me, she said to me, she's prepared to go with me and Rob to get some of the other guys out. That was the first time that she was prepared to stab one of the friends in the back. So, but that's Survivor. It's a game. You play it. If that's what you want to do, you do it. But then when Rob started saying, you actually blindside me or you stab me in the back, I will vote you out, I realized that he doesn't realize what Nicole is doing. Yes, she's feeding with the information. When I came back and I didn't tell her what I got on the immunity island, that I didn't share with her that I've got a white nullifier, she didn't trust me. She didn't know what we're going to do. Your question was, would you would have gone with us to vote Rob out 100%? Yes, you would. She was there to play the game, to win the game. And if that meant taking the amigos and stabbing their back, she will just go back to them afterwards with tears in her eyes and said, I had to do it for the game. And yes, she would have gone with it. Because at that night when we spoke about we said the beauty and the Oma, she was very excited. And the minute I refused to reveal what I got at the island, she went straight to Rob. Because she didn't know what I got and she was scared we're going to vote her out. So by going to Rob, she made sure that she would go to the next level. And there she actually, and I told Rob, she lied to Rob to say that Steffi said about the 3-woman alliance. And it was never Steffi's idea. It was Meryl's idea that I carried on. And she never knew it.
So that's one of the other, sorry for interrupting you there. We'll definitely go back to that sort of end game because there's a few things more I want to ask you around that scenario and what happened there towards the end. But just to touch on the Meryl one, because that came up in the actual show as well. You mentioned that Meryl, after the first buff drop, came to you with the women's alliance idea. In Meryl's mind, who would have been, and in your mind, who would have been part of that women's alliance? Because at that point, it was yourself, Meryl, and Nicole, I believe, were the women in that first tribe swap. And was Nicole supposed to be a part of that 3, or was it yourself and Meryl, and you were going to look for someone else to bring into it? What was the thinking around that?
You know what, Chris, that was after the first, we were still very much young into the game and we didn't know all the girls. We were just sitting one morning on the beach, and for me it was such a relief to go into the second group, Taolo group, because in my first group I was 35 years older than the youngest person in my Lamay group, which put me totally outside. And I got into a group where I had Nicole, where I had the people around me that I could actually talk to, that were mothers that had children that had the same experience as me, that missed their family. So our conversations there were very close, but it never came up. We sat one morning on the beach and we spoke about everything. And Meryl said to me, she would love to have a 3-woman finale. And we need to look at the women who there is, because at that stage, we haven't met all the women or interacted with them on a social basis. You could actually make anybody. So she never gave names and I never gave names. It was a thought that. And
okay.
then, carry on.
So So sorry, I wanted to move away from that question because obviously the Women's Alliance was something that you were after that you were looking out to see which women you could get and recruit to come into your alliance, and then that sort of didn't come back into play. I assume towards quite late in the game when you started having that conversation between Steffi and Nicole. Was this something that you brought up with Steffi a bit earlier on, or did you wait for your opportunity to bring it up later in the game? How did that sort of evolve? I guess after the merge.
When after the merge, Steph and I was walking back one day from the water well, and I said to her, "How about me, you, and Nicole trying to work towards a all-women alliance?" And Steffi there said to me, "Nicole is not ready yet. She will flip out and she will tell Rob, and the whole thing will be blown up." But then we were working on to get Sipe out because Mama was getting by very strong. I mean, she was
Mm.
playing the game, but she made the mistake of promising everybody to go to the final three instead of just keeping it back and do what because she was an excellent player.
Mm.
And there we kept back, and only once I realized, listen, I'm actually getting further along the line because working with Steffi and Rob and Nicole, in the 4 or 5 of us together, that if we can get another idol or Rob can lose a challenge, which was not a very big possibility, then we can try and do something as the numbers got smaller. So I did discuss it with Steffi and she liked it. And that night after the family visit, we tried with Nicole and she was absolutely 100% for it. She was quite excited because she was very, very cross. She was hurt and she was
Mm.
cross. And then when the next day after I came back from the island and I didn't share with them what I got, or specifically with her, she flipped on us and she went to Rob. And that just pressed my detonator button.
Yeah, we saw that towards the end, and well, I guess I want to before I go into this end game, I do want to talk about early in the game where we see you looking for idols, and then later on you actually do end up getting an idol. Two questions here. Firstly, as someone that wasn't the biggest fan, like you said, you're not someone who analyzes the game. What made you aware of idols so early in the game and going out there and searching for it so early? Because you were clearly thinking ahead of a lot of the other players there. And how long did you look for idols? Because we obviously see you get an idol at the end of the game. Did you spend a lot of time? Because like you mentioned, you weren't a bush baby. You weren't going out in the bush all the time. But how much time did you sort of invest into looking for these things?
You can laugh at me. When I realized this is getting a bit serious now, I'm actually going to make it into the thing. I started reading about it and idols and where to look for idols. And they said there's always in the beginning an idol at the water well. That's why
Mm.
from the beginning, every time I went to fetch water, I started looking for an idol, and I never actually thought of groveling under the thing. And the amount of hojas and spiders there would put me off in any case to put my hand in there because I never know what I will pull out. So yes,
Mm.
I looked for idols there. I was totally oblivious to the thing that if an idol goes out in tribal council, that another one gets placed back. Now, so please give me another chance. I want to go back and play again. The day that I got the idol, and there was a lot of comments on social media that the photographers or the people that was the crew told me where the idol was. Because I mean, Jock was climbing every tree, every bush, every rock to get an idol to not be voted out. And I
Yes.
literally walked in. I thought, you know what, we have to not vote you out. So if you get an idol, then good for you. And I actually stood and I was pouring water, and the sun just fell through the trees. And I looked and I saw, and I thought, these wet leaves. And I stopped and I looked, and I thought, but there's a very dry leaf there. And I looked back again, and you could just see this light brown colored, it's like a leather pouch that they put the idols in. And I bent down, and at that stage, there wasn't a camera near me. They were all following Jock that was looking for an idol. And the one guy turned around, and you could see their faces, oh shit, got the idol. And I was bawling my eyes out. I was sobbing. I couldn't talk. I was, I got an idol. I can't believe it. And we had to reenact the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because then they had to say to the people, please come back. This woman, this old finally got the idol, and poor Jacques is still climbing the banana trees to try and get an idol. So Maybe
Yes.
that was why it looked so fake. Because if they
Yes.
saw me when I got the idol, they would have thought I looked like some Sangoma doing a dancing on the floor between the
Yeah.
leaves. I was
But it was at the
absolutely
exact same spot. It was at the exact same spot that you had to go
yes.
back to get it. Okay. Yeah.
As I say, I had to wrap it up and put it back and then pour the water and then see it. But the first reaction was lost because they were all focused on Jacques trying to look for an idol. So that was
Okay.
a
That
bit.
makes that makes a lot of sense. And you know, with obviously getting that idol, that's going to help you later in the game. That was the first advantage that you had, and I'm definitely going to ask Rob a bit more about that because there's a lot of talk about Rob potentially not playing his idol in that one if he didn't win his immunity. I need to ask him that question directly at some point in regards to if that was actually going to be the case and if it was just really good TV. I feel like Rob's a more savvy player than that, and he probably would have played it, but I do know Nicole had a pretty big spell on him, so who knows? Because she nearly convinced him there not to play as idol. We just would never know. But I'll definitely ask him that question. Yeah. The second advantage that you got in the game, actually, before I ask you about that second advantage, you touched on Jacques, and I want to touch on Jacques as well, because what was it like playing the game with someone like Jacques, who is such a big fan of the show, that he was hard to kill in the game because he kept getting these advantages and he kept getting the idols. I want to know what it was like playing with him, and then specifically, you know, going into that night where he fooled everyone and he didn't play the idol. There was a lot of controversy in regards to some of the bickering and fighting that happened around camp that night. What was it like being there? Because obviously you would have heard when you listen to some of these reviews and interviews that we did, or even the recaps that we did, we obviously speculate ourselves as well because we weren't there. We didn't see everything that was going down. What was it like playing against them, and what was that night like when, you know, everything went down with Jacques sort of being relegated to go and sleep in the hammock instead of being in the camp?
You know, that was my question before that time. What will happen if I say things that I should not say? Jacques was an absolute, and he still is an absolute survivor fanatic. I mean, he knows the ins and outs in games, and he was a strong contender to be able to win it. But he's and he's a very friendly guy. You can talk to him, and he's got a lot of knowledge. But sometimes let me put it this: his interpersonal skills towards women are not that wonderful. And if he gets agitated or tense, or he doesn't get his way in a challenge, he shoots his mouth off, and it's not always a very friendly version. Because at one of the councils, of the tribal council after that night, Nico said to me, I used to swear or say words, so why did I get so cross? So I said to him, if I swear because I'm cross at myself, and I swear at myself. I don't insult somebody else's mother or child. And that was not the first time that Jacques was verbally abusive towards women. And I think that night, even though he made a fantastic move. I mean, buttoning up that shirt with the idol was absolutely tops. But to go and sit on a little kasiki and turn around and say whatever word you use can come to me was like a detonator button. And like he said, he was physically scared for himself, afraid for himself, because at that stage we had to say to some people, you know, just calm down. You can't actually listen this up, because then you'll be out of the game. So let's just pull back. We never told him he cannot sleep under the shelter with us. It was his own choice to go and lay in the hammock, or then in the end, I think he went to lay under the couch to stay out of the rain. He could have come back, but he burned a lot of bridges that night. And yes, we were cross because it just got to a point that, you know, you as a woman, you can take so much snide remarks or ugly things being said to you, and then up to a point, enough is enough. It is a game. Outward, outlast, outplay. But there's some morality or some ethical way that you work with people that you need to take into consideration. But Jacques still is a fantastic guy. I mean, he's the one guy that the only thing he spoke about was their family visit. And like my daughter said to me the next day, Haley, his wife, her heart broke for Haley because they realized, because they were waiting at the meeting point for the family visit when Haley was told, you're not going to see Jacques. And she said she was absolutely heartbroken. So yes, I feel for him, but in a way, you can play the game without insulting people in a very bad way. And that just blew up.
Yeah, I think I said it in the recaps as well, and I don't know how you felt about our interpretation of it, but when you're out there and you're playing a game, I feel like everybody goes into this tribalistic survival mode, and Rob said it best in the show himself, like he felt like he was literally fighting for his life at certain points in the game. So I think that your senses are heightened in any case. So sometimes, and again, like, I'm not taking away, I didn't see everything, I wasn't there for 24 hours, but the slightest comment can be taken in an even more extreme way when you're out there. And it's something for new players to be very aware of, that if you're playing the game and you're in that position, that people might take your words and think that it's something even more than what it potentially is. Because to us as viewers, what it sounded like in that instance, and like I said, we only saw that specific scenes that they showed us, it sounded like he was saying that he was going to take out the biggest player. Obviously didn't use the best words to describe that. Yeah. And in normal life, maybe you would have forgiven him for it. But when you're out there and you're, sort of deprived of food, you've been fighting for your life for so long, it is a you versus him mentality, because that is Survivor, right? It's about trying to stay within the numbers.
Yeah, and what we also must realize is we've been trying to get Jacques out, and he played us, boy. He played us. He was excellent in it. And what you must realize is that was maybe 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and you've been up since 6 o'clock. So you're really 2, 3 o'clock in the next morning. In 4 or 5 hours time, it's the next challenge. You're tired, you're cold, you in shock. You couldn't get Jacques out. He played us again like a lot of fools, and you're just frustrated. And then he comes back. And he just sits there and he says, my office door's open. Wow. Then enough is enough. And it's like you say, people are not there. You don't live in that environment. You almost become like a savage sometimes.
It's what was that story that we learned at school about the kids that go onto the island and they have to survive and they start turning on each other? I forgot the name now. It was, my English teacher would not be happy with me. But in any case,
Sure.
moving on from that, you got an advantage as well later in the game, which was the vote nullifier, which is quite a unique advantage. It's not been used in that way. We've seen idle nullifiers in international seasons, but we haven't seen a vote nullifier. So the vote nullifier, you get it quite late in the game there, and you decide to keep it as a souvenir for your son-in-law, so you can put it in his barn. You guys can still have conversations about it.
And did that cause big nonsense, because I've got 2 son-in-laws. So the one that got it was very happy, but the one that didn't get it, all his friends said, you're lucky, your mother's going to give it to you. And let me tell you, it's still, I think I have to go back and play another Survivor and get another idol or something to bring back to the other one. So yes, I won't say that ever again.
Well, I wanted to ask you a question. We were sort of speculating, and obviously Doral was with you in your first tribe. He came back into the mix somewhere with the final 7 because Rob worked with him and somehow pushed him back into that conversation. But it did seem like you and Doral didn't have a very close relationship throughout most of the game. Not that you guys were, I don't know if you were enemies or anything, but you just didn't, we never saw you talking. And towards the end of the game there, one of the big things, and I think I mentioned it in the previous recap, is that I thought a good move at that point could have been to try and bargain with Doral and say, hey, I've got this advantage, we should take Nicole out, instead of trying to get convincing Rob to take Nicole out instead, because you could have nullified one of their 2 votes and then have Doral move with you, and you say, Doral, this is going to be a big move for you. You haven't really, in my opinion, from what I've seen, how do you sell yourself to the jury? Were you ever considering working with Doral there and using the vote nullifier in such a way, or was that relationship between you, Doral, just one of those relationships where you just knew I was never going to convince him to come with me and try something different here?
Listen, Duran, I came from the Lumite tribe right from the beginning, and he was with Mike and Jeffrey, so we never interacted. I was the old lady. We would sit around the campfire and chat and talk, but strategy and alliances, never. And at that stage, Nicole was with Dural whenever she could be, because she had to put a flashing smile and the blue eyes at him, and he was totally enthralled with it. There was no ways that I was going to get him to vote against Nicole. And I also could see that the relationship with Roux and Rob was very tight. So that was also not going to work. And when we were the final four, I knew that the three of them was going to go, because when I went to Nicole and Rob and I asked him that afternoon, is there any way that you will take me with you? I got the very nice lecture from Nicole, then how I broke her trust and who I am and what I not am, and I had another say what I wanted to say there. I just thought, I'm not going to waste a vote nullifier, because if you've got 3 votes against you and you cancel one, you still got 2 votes against you. I tried to go and speak to Rob in the cult and try and do it, say, let's make it a worthy finale where there's 3 people that everybody can go and sell themselves with Roux, and they don't show it a lot on the TV, but in most of the tribal councils, you would see if he sits there and he shakes his head, everybody's laughing. Because at every tribal council, the Roux would sort of say, hey, Nico, I don't know what's going on. I'm confused. I don't know what's going on. So for me to go to him and try and convince him, and he gives this image of he doesn't know what the hell is cooking, at that stage, my sense of humor was very thin. And like I said, Confucius, I cannot work with a person that I now have to go and try and convince him to go and speak to either Rob or Nicole to vote one of them out, because it's not going to work. They were thick as thieves. And at that stage, I think Rob realized, if they vote Roux out, it's going to be me, him, and Nicole. I still didn't stand a chance, because, well, maybe not against Nicole, but against Rob, because he would win. The jury at that stage really did not like Nicole. So we actually thought, it's going to be a clean sweep. And then once they started saying why they should be the winners, then you start listening to these stories of what they were doing or not doing.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you a question about that, because as fans, when we looked at the show, and I had Jake on last week to talk to me about the finale episode. Both myself and Jake, the first time we watched this, we thought it was going to be a clean sweep as well, because we got that sense that the jury wasn't very happy with Nicole. And in my opinion, I thought she played a really good game, but I definitely understand why the jury didn't like her that much towards the end of the game, and with some of the things that she said that you took her on about the good people and the bad people and being quite self-righteous towards the end. I think those things didn't go down well with the jury. What sort of happened in that finale to shift a lot of people's votes towards Nicole? Because she ends up pushing Rob pretty close there. It was a 6-4 vote to win, and you did vote for Rob, so I will ask you also, what made you vote for Rob rather than Nicole, and when did she lose your vote? And then secondly, what do you think made other people vote for Nicole still at the end there? Was she really that good at her final tribal speeches?
When you go to the final tribal speeches, we really had a hard time finding out, because Roux from the beginning it was a no-go. Nobody's going to vote for him. It was between Rob and Nicole, and we really struggled, because Nicole kept on telling us how wonderful Rob was. And eventually we said to them, guys, you need to tell us why you should win the money. So if you have to let your friend fall under the bus, your amigo, or push him under the bus, then do it. Nicole lost my vote the night she turned around and she said to Steffi, you betrayed the amigos. And I thought, Jesus, that is smart coming from you, woman. You betrayed your amigos over and over and over. And there she lost my vote. And, even when we went back and I said, why? And they said, no, everything just went sour. And even when they were selling it, I realized that Rob played an absolutely fantastic game in masterminding it, that he got information from Roux, from Steffi, from Nicole, from me, from Mike, from everybody. And just the way that he played with people without being rude to people, without being obnoxious, and do the outwit, outlast, outplay in a very nice way. That's why he got my vote. And he was just an absolutely extraordinary player and courteous. And, I know Survivor's blindsight and it's backstabbing but in the end, you must realize that you're going to go back to real life and people's going to look at you.
Mm,
And if you portray certain things, own up to it. Say that was my game plan.
mm.
Don't affirm that you didn't say, but this is who I am. It doesn't work for me. And Rob played a fantastic game. The
No,
people that
100%.
voted for her, I think the people that voted for her was against Rob. They were upset with Rob because he outplayed them. And I don't know, you have to ask them why they voted for her.
Yeah, I definitely have asked some of the people, and I've got to say, watching the game the second time around, like I said, it's not like Nicole was. She wasn't a bad player. She missed that last bit, which was there's this whole thing with Survivor. Obviously, you're trying to outwit everybody and outlast everybody, and you're voting people home. But how do you vote someone home without leaving a bad taste in their mouth, so that they would still want to vote for you to win at the end? And I think that's the part that she missed a little bit. And like you said, when she said to Steffi, "You betrayed the amigos," she betrayed them when she voted out Nathan earlier in the game. So I hear you, and I don't like good versus bad. It's just something that I really find difficult in a game like Survivor, where the aim of the game is to get to the end. Unless you're doing something like you said that is bad outside of the game, and there's certain people. I think there's very few people in Survivor that have played the game that have actually been legitimately bad people and made a really like human bad thing happen inside of the game. There's maybe two
Yes.
two in 40 seasons. I can maybe recall two people that did something like that. So and Rob is a great winner. He's someone that I'm very proud to have as a Survivor South Africa winner. So well done on selecting a great winner there that is very highly respected in the world when it comes to winners. He's seen as somebody, I think I've said it a few times on this show, that is probably a top 5 winner of all time with any Survivor US, Australia season and Survivor South Africa season together. So it's great that you were part of a jury that voted that. And your question is seen as the question in that final tribal that is literally saying to them, you now need to show why the other person didn't do a good job, and you've got to put on your big boy pants, like you said at the end, that Rob to put on his big boy pants to actually win the game. And I think it's against his nature, because I've spoken to Rob a few times now as well. The nicest guy to like you. I went into that conversation thinking he was going to be the celebrity guy that's going to think he's above, and he's not. He's not that at all. He's super nice. He's spoken to me outside of that, and just I can tell why he did so well in the game. If he was to go back, would have the biggest target on his back, I think, just
No,
because of who he is.
if they will vote him out for the first time if they can do it. He'll just have to win every challenge. No, he's an absolutely amazing person. Is I had alliances or promises with Dante and with Cobus and with Rob and with Rocco. And I mean, Dante was seen as this little small guy with a very short fuse. He's not. He's
Mm,
a gentle soul. He's a nature's child. And we still chat now and again on WhatsApp or Instagram. But he was a threat because he had absolute determination to actually go and win it.
mm,
And he and Rob used to sit and talk. I mean, it looked like they hated each other. But in the end, like when Dante said, I cannot vote for a person that was one of the greatest plays I've ever watched. And that was what Rob was, and that was what Dante also was.
mm. Yeah, I want to see Dante come back. He's one of my biggest people I want to see come back. I think it's pretty well known that I'm a big, like, my favorite player for your season was Jark. I like the underdog story. I like someone fighting from the bottom to try and get to the end. And probably Dante and like Rob and Dante were close to being like, I'd say Rob was probably my second and then Dante my third, just based on those players. And then so many good players. It's so tough. Like, we'll talk about that in the retrospective in a few seconds about what we thought of every single player. It's you sadly can't bring the whole cast back at the same time. But, if you were ever asked to play the game again, I think you alluded to it earlier in the interview, would you say yes? Would you want to go out there and do like an all-stars type of season if you were asked to come back?
The night I was voted out, while we were standing there just before Nico put my flame out, I said to him, Nico, please speak to Andre and speak to Luributa. I want to come back and do Survivors, but please do Survivor Seniors. It will be quite interesting. I mean, can you imagine the paramedics they have to have there, the wheelchairs and the walkers and the things with us? I want to do that again, but I want to be the youngest person on that Survivor. If I can ever go back, I would go back within a heartbeat. I think at this stage, maybe I'm a bit too old, but I would absolutely
Mm,
love to go back. It was always a dream of mine to do it, and I always said I want to do it. And the people
mm.
laughed at me, and I made it. I did it. It was an absolutely awesome experience. So
Do you
yes,
have
I'll go back.
so you'd go back? Do you have any regrets within the game itself? Obviously there would be no regret in playing the game, but was there any regrets in any of the moves or things that you thought about after getting out of the game where you thought, oh, if I just did this a little bit differently, things might have turned out different for me towards the end of the game?
I actually, we were busy watching Survivor Australia now, and I sent Roux a question, and I said to him, was there another idol to be played after we were only the 4 people? And he said, no, the last idol gets played on the 5th when there's only 5 people left. My only regret is that I actually didn't go out to look for more idols, that I thought, and that was my own stupidity. I didn't know about it.
Mm.
Um, I no.
No other regrets because you made it all the way. I mean, to get into fourth place, it's one shy of getting into the finale where you would have been able to make your case to win the game. So you definitely had a good run. So I can see how there's probably more regrets for people sometimes if they don't make it that deep into the game. Sort of shifting it around a little bit here towards the end. Are you saying you're watching Australian Survivor at the moment? Firstly, what Australian season are you watching at the moment? It'd be quite interesting to know.
I don't know, you asked me a question like that. The one
you
where
know,
Dave is in there, that he got voted out now, the last one that I watched. And
Yes.
yes, I
Champions
was so
versus contenders
happy.
too. Yeah,
Yes,
it's
and I,
champions versus contenders too.
champions versus contenders. Yeah. And you just watch it. It is brutal. I mean, the Australians. I mean, those challenges. I can just say thank God they didn't give me those challenges. What?
Jark endorsed you for those, by the way. I had Jark on an interview, or not an interview, a recap, because we recapped that whole season that you're watching now. We recapped before we recapped your season. And I had Jark on as a special guest to recap one of the episodes. And I said to him in that, I was like, oh, you know, the I said to him, Laetitia, the older lady in your season, how would she have gone on this season? Because it was the challenges to me, I look at it and I'm like in my early 30s and I think to myself, I would struggle with some of those challenges. And he said to me, he's like, don't underestimate Laetitia. Don't underestimate Tani Laetitia. She's a lot stronger than you think. She would have done well on those challenges. So he endorsed you in one of those recaps, just so you know.
No, you know what I love about those challenges is it's all water based. If you put me in the water, I would absolutely love it.
Mm,
I've done 16 mid-mast, so for me it is. I love water challenges. Every time we went into a challenge, I knew I was not going to win it, but I said to myself, I will quit when I drop down dead. And at one of our little fire sessions where it was discussed and it was said, but you're the weakest person. So I asked Mike, I said to him, Mike, me not finishing in the mud challenge today, and you not finishing in the mud challenge, but Rocco won it. He got it in. What is the difference between the two of us? What makes you a better person in the challenge today than me? And he
mm,
couldn't answer me. I said, if you have put the last flag in, yes, you were the winner because you made sure that we won.
mm,
And people must realize that Survivor is not just about a physical challenge. Yes, if you're strong and you're fit and you can run, you can win your immunity idols when you go to merge. But that challenge is 2 or 3 hours of the day. The rest of the 21 hours, you go back to the camp, and if you're not emotionally strong and mentally strong and inside yourself strong and sure of yourself, you're going to fall apart. And that is what happened to these big guys. They
mm.
come there and they're strong and they've got muscles and they can do the challenges. They get back to the camp and they're used to eating 5, 6, 7 high protein meals a day. Now they get a flippin', like I say, coconut and water to drink. I mean, I ate
Mm.
a sea urchin, I ate raw fish, we ate whatever they could get. We had crabs. Things that if you give it to me now in a restaurant, I will look at you. I still refuse to eat coconuts. I will not eat coconuts. That's for the rest of my life. I'm like, if I go to Survivor again, I'll have to eat it. But yeah,
Well, not if you do it in South Africa. Are you watching are you sort of up to date with the new season for Survivor South Africa coming out, Immunity Island? Have you had an opportunity to look at who the cast is going to be or any of those things?
I just look at the cast. There's a few mean faces there. My money's on Dino. He have to win. If he doesn't win it, we will have a personal meeting, and I will tell him what I'm thinking of him. It's a young cast, so it's going to be interesting because it's not there's an older person you can actually vote out. They're all like fit mean people, and it's going to be interesting because it's not in the seas, rivers, and it's South African territory. The wild coast can sometimes be, if a real thunderstorm comes over, I think it'll be quite vicious. You have to translate to the people what I said now.
Yeah, so basically, if there's like thunderstorms coming over, it could be quite bad. But I think the time of the year that they were playing it, though, they were out there around December. I think it might be okay. It's not fully summer yet, so I don't think they get those summer thunderstorms or anything like that in that area. In some ways, it would be interesting to see because I don't know if the conditions are going to be as bad in regards to all the rain that you guys received over on the season. Because I know Samoa, it rains a lot, which you would have experienced when you were there. I've been to Samoa before. They get a lot of summer rain, and it gets, what people don't realize is that in the day, the humidity is not like the humidity you're used to over in South Africa. It's a different type of humidity, and then at nighttime it gets super cold. So you get both. It fluctuates from very humid, very hot to very cold at nighttime, especially if it rains, right? In South Africa, they might not have those conditions in regards to the rain, but they'll have to deal with all the nasty creepies, like you mentioned. Like there'll be some poisonous snakes out there. There'll be some really poisonous spiders. Like Samoa doesn't really have as much poison. Like there is one of the most dangerous sea snakes that sort of is around Samoa, but I think in general these snakes aren't that. I don't know if there's even any snakes on the island.
There's no snakes on the island. There's spiders on the island, that I can tell you. You wake up in the morning, you look down in your lap, and there's this younger spider sitting, and there's a camera on you. You decide, am I going to wet myself? Am I going to swell myself? And you just like gently flip it away, and you sit there until the camera's being, but you try to be strong. If I see a spider now, I can have a can of soup and I flip and kill the poor thing. But there, I just had like to flip it away and internalize what I've just done to myself. No, there's no snakes in Samoa. That was the first thing that my kids told me. Why there's no snakes in Samoa, don't worry.
Yeah. And I was going to say, you mentioning Dino as being your favorite. It seems like Dino's everybody's favorite that I've listened to in the preseason sort of things happening. So Dino's got a lot of pressure on him coming in here because everybody's expecting him to win it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
As a big fan, I've noticed that he's he went to the reunion show for you guys, and he's spoken and been in the Survivor circles for quite a long time. So you're not too high on my number one guy pick, or Chappies, Francois Chapman. You don't think Chappies will make it all the way?
I think they should push for a woman this year.
Yeah, I think that it could be. It could be. Yeah.
There's I've listened to some of the interviews of what they stand for, but you know what? When you do your interview, what you say in the interview, when you get it's two different things. You have this idea and this image what you're going to do, and when you get there, reality starts. Your fantastic ideas back at home means absolutely squat. You have to think there on your feet and in the situation, in the challenge, and in the moment. And what you really want to do doesn't always, it's not always going to work out for you. And they need to realize that also. You need to realize that if you want people to see what you do, you need to do it in front of the cameras, which I didn't do it. I was the quiet person in the background. But then again, that was my strategy, because in my career, I observe patients. I look for signs and symptoms. I look at their body language. And that's what I did there. I kept quiet and I read their body language and I looked at what they said. And you can ask them a question, see how they answer, and interpret things that way. Jacques laughed at me when I said that. And then after that disastrous night that he was ousted out and he had to sit at the camp and we were all talking, he actually said in the tribal council that he needs to apologize because by just sitting back and looking at the people, there are so much that he learned from them and saw that he never observed. And that's also a way that you can play your game.
Well, Rob called you the stingray for a reason, right? He said you were the stingray waiting out there, and then he never realized how dangerous you were until the end there when he saw you expose yourself and go after Nicole. But it's been great talking to you. I do want to finish it. I do want to finish it off with Laetitia, with the new players coming in. I'm always interested in this. Like, they're going to go through this whole experience now where there's going to be a lot of hype around them. There's going to be a lot of media coming at them, people telling them why they did moves well, why they didn't do moves well. They're going to get positive and negative attention. What is your sort of advice to the new players out there that are going to play the game in regards to how to deal with the fame and all of this, comments and people, all the armchair critics that will come at them while they're playing the game? What is your advice to them?
What I did was I came back, my biggest problem was I came back thinking I played Survivor, it's over, let me go back to work, do my nursing, and I never thought about life after Survivor. So I call her my media relations officer. That's my youngest daughter, Monique. And she basically ran my Instagram and my Facebook things because, and I always thought, I always get these nice messages, nothing roots coming up, what were the people talking about? And she actually cut it out that I could not see it because she was shit scared. I'm going to tell them, listen, guys, just off. You don't know what you're talking about. And so, and eventually I started like looking first before she could start editing what I could see. And I saw the things, and one thing you must realize is don't take it personally. Because look at yourself when you watch it. You're lying there on the couch, you're sitting in your lazy boy, and you're telling this old duck, what the hell are you doing there? You're 50 years old, go and retire, sit on the stoop and do your knitting, whatever you want to do. Not until you've been there and done that. Don't criticize people. And even now, when I look at Survivor now, where previously I would have said, are you stupid? Why do you do this? I just think to myself, shush. It is hard out there, people. You get there, you've got nothing. You've got the 3 pieces of clothes that they allow you on that island, and that's it. You've got coconut, you've got fresh water. It's not easy to think clearly or act clearly or do things. And don't take things personally. It's always like, also when you
we
go
call it in New Zealand. In New Zealand, we call it a tall poppy syndrome. Like whenever there's a tall poppy, you need to cut it down. And for anyone in life, I think that's a sign of some sort of success when you get criticized, because it means that you're doing something where a lot of other people are doing absolutely nothing. They can't get criticized. But for me, if you're getting some criticism, I've always lived my life that way, that I feel like, okay, I'm doing something right because at least I'm getting noticed.
Yeah, I'm not bored. But what was also nice is that I wasn't expecting to walk into Pick and Pay or into a restaurant and people recognize me. And I mean, we were back for a year, and just after the season, 4 or 5 months after the season, COVID happened. And I would be walking in Pick and Pay and checking my things in the Leandra, and my daughter would say, Ma, please stop. That woman wants to take a photo of you. And I would like turn around and thought, no, why do you want it? And then I said, smile, Ma, and calm down. They're talking about Survivor, so I could like a smile. Or they would recognize Leandra because she was on the island with me. And then COVID came and you put your mask on, so nobody sees you. And it was quite sweet. I'd like to share it is we had a mom with me in the hospital, and she was end stage cancer, and her son Tristan walked in and had 2 ice creams with flakes from McDonald's for his mom. And he walked past my office and he looked in and he saw my face because my mask was off. And he dropped both ice creams and he says, "The stunning Laetitia!" And he ran. And at the day, we still talk to each other and chat. He's a Survivor fanatic. And
it's awesome.
He used to come and visit me. His mom was lying there talking to his brother and the family and visiting. So, and even now, because I've got my mask on, nobody sees me. But when I take my mask off, and the patients realize who you are, and they forget about their problems and they start talking about you. They ask questions and they think, if you could have survived this, we can survive this. And for me, that was heartwarming and almost a reward on what I've done out there for myself means a lot to people now in the ward. When we nurse post-COVID patients, said we can actually survive this. This will also go past. It was 30 days, 39 days. I don't even know how many days it was, because I just stopped counting. But
Yeah.
you get through it. You get through it, and it makes you a much richer person, your personality and the way you look at life.
I can't agree with you anymore. Laetitia, it's been great having you on the show. You've given us a lot of tidbits in regards to this. I'd be interested to keep in touch with you to find out what your thoughts are in the season that is coming up, because I'm sure you'll have a lot of opinions about the gameplay, because now you're one of those armchair critics. You can sit on the side and watch the game, and we can, look at the edit and look at it. But I hope that there's nothing in the season that I said that was completely off in regards to your gameplay, or if there is anything you wanted to set the record straight on, this is your opportunity. You're probably not going to get the opportunity to set the record straight and say, Chris, you were wrong on that one.
Well, there's quite a few things that you guessed wrong, which I will just zip about.
Let's pretend like I was completely right all the time, Laetitia. I don't want to lose all my credibility, and then no one's going to follow me moving forward.
You know what, Chris? I love listening to you, and then to Ryan afterwards, and the way you analyze things. And I think you've got a very clear picture of what's going on there, what's going on behind the scenes also. And it's a pity that they have to take a whole day and prop it into 1 hour, because there were so many fantastic moments there and things that were said and done. And, things that I knew that I've said and that was filmed and it never came on, and that frustrates you. But I'll stay in touch. I love listening to your podcast, because if you listen to that and you go and you watch and you see this, it's not spot on. So
Yeah.
yes, I'm excited. I keep on listening. I'll keep supporting you. Don't worry. And I can promise you now, after this, with my whole family, they're going to listen. You should reach your 1,000 mark very soon.
Yeah, we're pushing very hard for that, guys. We're sitting at 730 subscribers now, so pushing to get to 1,000. And if we do get to that 1,000, then I will reach out to Lerubuta, like I told Jacques. Let's put a stretch target out there and see if we can get him on the show at some point, because I know he likes to talk about Survivor as well, and it'll be awesome to get to meet him as well.
Get Leroux and Andre together. That team is absolutely exceptional. I said to him, I can't wait to see what tortures he actually thought out for the files now.
Right,
If
so
I get Andre and Leroux together, then they will come.
100%. I would be more than happy to have him on. I don't know if Andre's ever actually been on one of the podcasts before. I've heard some podcasts with Leroux doing it, but I don't think Andre's actually ever done it. But if he wants to do it, I'm more than willing to speak to both of them. And it'd be interesting to talk to them about the difficulties of doing this production in the COVID sort of world, and how they had to create the bubble, and the logistics about moving the whole production team to South Africa, and all those kind of things would be interesting to get some insights.
I'd take my hat off for them to actually go forward with it. And it's I don't know if any other countries actually done it. So it's kudos to them to actually think outside the box and say, let's go forward and give the people something to look forward to. I can't wait for the 3rd of June. I'm very excited.
It's close. It's getting close now. So, guys, Laetitia, stay there for a second while I just finish this part of the recording, and then we'll close it off, and I'll talk to you about how I'll share the link. Guys, in a few seconds from now, you'll see both myself and Riley back, and we will do a retrospective on the whole season to talk about where we think this season ranks overall with all the Survivor seasons that we have watched. So please stick around for that. It should only take about 30 or 45 minutes, hopefully, on that conversation as well. And we'll talk to you soon. All right, Riley, that was Laetitia on the show here with me doing her interview. And I was quite surprised to hear that Laetitia has never actually done any podcasts up until this point. So we have got her here as a premiere interview. You heard it here first on Reality Pop on Survivor Worldwide. Riley, it's great to have you back. Obviously, we didn't have you here last week to talk about the finale episode. I had Jake filling in for you, but we're going to sort of close everything off here today, and we're going to talk about Survivor Island of Secrets as a whole, as a season, and we're going to do a bit of a retrospective on this season. Riley, for you, if you think Island of Secrets in your mind, where does the season as a whole sort of sit in your mind? What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it?
I'll tell you what, I going into the season, I was very skeptical about that twist being the Island of Secrets, and I thought Being a US Survivor fan and watching a season like Ghost Island, which I wasn't a fan of, I thought this isn't going to work out. But it did actually really work, the twist. And I think the great thing about this season is just the creativity the producers have in terms of creating different twists or advantages and different game mechanics, like with Tanya not going to tribal council and having the opportunity to skip that to keep herself safe in the game. In terms of where I position it, though, I do like it as a season. Probably not the greatest South African season, obviously, because Philippines the season before was just so brilliant. But I would certainly say it is definitely in the top tier when I look at international Survivor seasons as a whole. Definitely up there in probably the top 20, including US and Australian and South African seasons as well. The cast as well, just a great cast, a lot of great choices there. Some questionable ones, especially when we look at the Sa'ula tribe and that little conflict between Leanne and Nicole there, and perhaps some vested interests at play there. But Rob as a character, great winner to have. And yeah, lots of fun characters like your Jarks and your Tanyas that really do make a season a lot more entertaining as well.
100%. Now, for me, I'm really bad when it comes to making lists, but at some point we will make a list of like what is our favorite international Survivor seasons here on the off season, which will be a while before we get there because we've got Survivor South Africa Immunity Island coming up, which we're all very excited about. And then probably at some point we'll have Australian Survivor back on air as well. So probably would be closer towards the end of the year that we'll look into the seasons as a whole and we'll rank them. But one of the things that for me always is very important in a good season, I think it's the most important thing. I feel like producers in recent times have lost the plot, not South African producers necessarily, but especially in the US and some other places where they feel like it needs to be theme heavy, twist heavy. I know the theme is gone in Survivor US 4 season 41. We're all very excited about that. In my mind, I'm excited. The theme and all that doesn't matter to me. What really matters to me is the characters, the people that you cast. They are the core of your show. If you don't have a good cast, the season's not going to be exciting. And for me, this season, like you said, did deliver in that respect. We had great cast members out there. We had a lot of people who wanted to play the game, and then we had some new people here. And the one thing I did want to ask you, Riley, because it kind of came up in discussion with Laetitia off air, but there was a lot of people playing this game this time around who weren't the biggest fans. They kind of watched the show because they knew they were going to get onto the show, but they weren't really fans of the show prior to that. But those people, in my mind, were the final five. Those were the people who weren't the biggest fans. So, whenever somebody goes out there like a Jark, or this season you've got like a Renier or a Dino who's going to go out there in Immunity Island, how big of a threat are they really as fans on the show? You should be worried about the non-fans, right? Because the non-fans always seem to be able to make it that much further, win the game. Why is the target on the fans and not on the non-fans who normally do better in the game?
That's right. But I feel like to a certain level, you need to have the super fans like your Jarks. I think it's just a matter of playing way too hard out of the gate. And we did see that Jark had a lot of misplays in that season, and obviously really amplified his target through playing those advantages, which ultimately put him on the bottom, and really amplified his target there. But I do like that a lot of these Survivor seasons do have a mix of non-fans or recruits and actual fans of the game. People always say, why can't we have 20 super fans on a season? But then it's going to be chaotic with 20 Jacob Derwins or 20 Jarks running around on an island. It just doesn't jive well. So yeah, to have people like that who aren't as familiar with the game and actually see how they adjust, from day 1 to day 39, and actually as they pick up these social plays, these strategic plays, and they really start to understand the game. That's what I like to see. I like to see the progression of a character, and I don't like people that will just come in on day 1 thinking I'm going to win it all, and then obviously end up with pie on their face at the end.
Yeah, well, I want to take off on that a little bit as well and sort of work around what you just mentioned there with wanting a mix between recruits and the fans. I agree 100% with you. I've heard before when, a lot of people weren't happy with Nicaragua because there were a lot of recruits on that season. And I know that both of us are quite big fans of that season. We love a lot of characters on that season. I come to watch this show firstly to see the characters, to see the people. And if you go out there to tell me that you've watched the show for 20 years or however long you've watched it, and you're going to do X, Y, and Z because that's the right move to do because you saw Boston Rob do it, I'm not getting to know you as an individual and a person on the show. And I will go as far as to say that a lot of the people who were recruits, even on the US show, becomes your biggest characters in any case on the show at a later stage, because they're just authentically themselves. And what we've got to realize is that you need to engage not just the super fans, the people who are big fans who watch the show. You need to engage the casual people out there who watch the show, who wants to relate to someone like a Rob Bentelli because they can relate to them, they know them in their everyday life, or they can relate to Auntie Laetitia, because they've got a grandmother who is like Laetitia, or they can relate to Sipe because she's that mother figure that they know, So I think that it is really important that you get the mix right when it comes to these casts. And I think that we both can agree that the Island of Secrets had a great cast. I mean, it had people like Dante, who was extremely explosive, and definitely someone that didn't just do things for the sake of doing it because the game X, Y, and Z in his game plan told him to do it. He lived with his heart on his sleeve and was quite explosive at times, and that made for good TV. He was against the grain, wanted to upset the apple cart and go against Rob. He was good at challenges. Like, that type of character is one that you like to see on the show. It brings a lot of excitement to the show. You had Steffi, who, again, very explosive character, honest and authentic about who she is as a person, and will make no apologies for cutting people loose if she needed to, and she was a great athlete. So obviously Jark, your super fan, brought a lot of things, or he doesn't classify himself as a super fan, but he probably is pretty close to it. And he brought a lot of excitement because he knew where to go and look for these idols. But also what's interesting here is that Laetitia, as someone who wasn't a super fan of the show at all, she was what I would really say as a casual fan, she started looking for idols on day one.
Yeah, exactly. And it is just the way you adjust to the game, I suppose. Because, yeah, you're right. There is no strategy to the game Survivor. And I think the biggest reason why we watch Survivor is because of the characters. And sometimes you just land on a cast. And if you're someone like Jark, you might have the best plan to get to the end. But if you end up in a tribe with someone like Tanya, who is unpredictable, or maybe someone like a Felix who you just clash with there, it really doesn't bode well, and there are a lot of challenges to get to the end. So yeah, you really do need to just play, I suppose, a more conservative game in that sense, and that is probably where Jark fell down, in that he was just way too aggressive at the time, and really making those big moves earlier in the game, which, I mean, didn't work out too well. But I do like having people like, as you said, Steffi, who's someone as well that great character, very honest, physical beast as well. But she also brings a new audience to the show as well. And that's what we need to acknowledge with a show like Survivor, is the superfan audience is very, very small. And people say this all the time in regards to US Survivor. Edge of Extinction or Samoa are perfect examples for me, in that characters like Rick Devens and Russell Hantz, they're not as appreciated by the superfan audience because they're way too over the top. But that's exactly what the casual audience like. They like those big characters. And that's exactly what Survivor South Africa Island of Secrets has provided us. I feel like when we look back at the previous season, Philippines, I don't think there were as many big characters. The strategy was definitely on another level, I thought, in Philippines. But this season, at least, you had those massive characters like your Steffis and your Nicoles, and obviously Jark, Sipe as well, great character. Rob Bentele, just a fantastic character as well. So I think you do need that those different people. And one of the things I like most about Survivor South Africa is just understanding the culture and the diversity of languages in South Africa. While I recognize that the cast probably isn't as diverse as it should be, and not too representative of South African society, I do like that people like Laetitia and Rob engaging in Afrikaans or Zulu, different languages. And that is such a great thing to see. People, talking in different languages on a show like this, because Survivor really is about, at its core, bringing together complete strangers from different walks of life and putting them all together on an island and seeing how they survive. You look back at Richard and Rudy, completely different people in Survivor Borneo, but they just meshed perfectly and obviously became lifelong friends there. So that is something I like, especially with this season, is just bringing people from different walks of life. And it is great to see someone like Laetitia, who was, I think, 58 years old on this season. But, seeing her interact with someone like Mike, who was 21, and just people from a different, different ages, different backgrounds. So great to see.
Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting you mentioning there that the casuals like the big characters. Am I a casual then because I love the big characters? I might be a bit more casual than what I thought. Like, I love strategy, but I feel like for me it is all about balance. You've got to have the yin with the yang, and you've got to appreciate both, because if you end up having people out there that all play this massively strategic game the whole time, and it's strategy, it's going to be like Sequester. And I find Sequester really hard to watch sometimes on YouTube, to be honest, like whenever they've got those seasons out, because all you see is strategy. You don't see any people moments. You don't see any of that other stuff that actually make me interested in watching a reality show. It's definitely, for me, I love the strategy, but I also love to see the other side. Now, another big thing here with Survivor South Africa, and specifically with this season, is that a lot of the times here, I feel like we do see a lot of the strategy and how votes are being put together. So there isn't that shock factor a lot of the times when we get into tribal councils and people are getting voted out. That could be that some people love that, and some people might hate that. For me personally, my opinion on it is that I actually quite like it. I like seeing how a vote comes together. I like seeing how somebody overplays their hand by doing something incorrectly in the game, and how that ends up biting them in the butt by the end of the episode when they get voted out, or them putting that together over a period of 2 or 3 episodes. It's just inevitable before Dante is going to go home. There's just no way he's going to win the game the way he's playing it. But some people might find that boring. For me personally, I like it. I like seeing the strategy that goes into voting someone out. And I also think that in the US, they overplay the whole blindside thing, and Winners at War was peak blindside to the viewers. I think back about when Ethan was sent home, and it came out of absolutely nowhere. There were no conversation around Ethan going home through the whole day. It was focusing on Parvati, and I believe it was Rob for most of the day, and somebody on the other side, and then Ethan gets blindsided from the side here. Things like that, I don't appreciate it. I want to see the vote. I want to see how they come to that conclusion that this is going to be the person that's going to go. How do you feel about the fact that at times this season was pretty predictable? Because I feel like after the merge, probably 2 or 3 episodes after the merge you probably already knew that Rob was going to win the season. I got that pretty early on, and I thought there may be an upset somewhere, but Rob pretty much 80% of the time was going to win that season.
Yeah, I don't think there was too much competition though. And I mean, you do have to look at what did the editors get. Obviously, we don't know how much footage they had there. But Rob was just playing such a controlling game to that point that it really was just watching how he got to the end, or ultimately he could have been blindsided and had a complete downfall. And I feel like that would have made great television. But Rob was the central character there. But I do think there was a lot of strategy, or not so much strategy, but scrambling from players like Dante or Mike or Jark, who were trying to make contingency plans. But I feel like with the cast, they were so regimented and feeding out of Rob's hand there that they weren't willing to make those moves. I am kind of on the same boat as you. I don't like too many blindsides, but it's always nice to have those sprinkled in there. What I don't like is where US Survivor has gone these days with the getting up at tribal council and whispering and just creating fireworks out of just a simple vote out and all this misdirection at tribal council. I find that to be a little bit annoying at times. So I don't mind when, particularly with a season like Survivor South Africa, Island of Secrets, where it's pretty straight and narrow, but there still is that bit of unpredictability. I mean, on a couple of those votes where they were trying to flush Jark's idol there, we didn't know, would Jark play the idol or would he ultimately get blindsided if he didn't play the idol, and would they put more votes on him? So there were some moments there where someone like Steffi flipped her vote. And I think more so with those plans coming together at Tribal Council, before Tribal Council rather, going back to camp on the next episode, we did see a lot of moments where we'd look at the aftermath of the vote. And I think with Survivor South Africa, I do believe they have more runtime than the US available to them. So we do get these longer episodes where we get more time at camp. I do like a little bit of strategy and really seeing how the vote comes together in the game, because I mean, at the end of the day, it can't all be listening to Tanya's stories. And yeah, it didn't seem like there was too much strategizing outside of Rob's contingency, because Rob really was running the game and he had his 7 people by his side the whole game that were just playing blind along with him. So it was really just his show, and no one else was strategizing, it seemed.
Yeah. Now, the biggest blind side for me in the game, the first time I watched it, the second time, obviously, when we did the recap, I knew it was coming. The first time I watched it was definitely Nathan. I just saw that relationship between Nathan and Nicole, the brother-sister relationship, the Amigos getting a lot of screen time and a lot of focus on them early in the game, that they were going to go all the way. You kind of had this feeling they were down and out early in the season, but for some other reason, I picked up on the edit, even the first time around, they were going to go quite deep. And Nathan being quite a big narrator of the show up until that point, I didn't see his blind side coming. I thought that he would squeeze into the merge there, but that was one of those examples where you did see all of the plans from different angles. You saw Nathan's plan about what he wanted to do to make sure that he gets his target out. At that point, I can't remember if it was Jeffrey. I think it was Jeffrey or Dante, one of the two. In any case, he was putting them against each other. And then you see Jeffrey very smartly here turning Nicole against them. And I didn't think that Nicole would turn against them. I knew Nicole had an idol in her pocket, but I think this is the first time we really saw that Nicole, even though she was sort of saying that a lot of her gameplay was around integrity and honesty and keeping people together and all this kind of thing, that her actions didn't really follow up with what she was doing in the game, because by her cutting Nathan at that point, her going back, and we spoke about this briefly as well. I can't remember if it was with Laetitia or with one of the other cast members, that her cutting specifically at this point, Nathan, she went back to tell Steffi that she betrayed the Amigos, but Nicole betrayed the Amigos way before Steffi betrayed the Amigos at any point. But it was a fascinating alliance to have a look at early on in the game, because they were like a true family, right? Because families fight and they bicker and they don't always disagree with everything that needs to happen, but they do to a certain degree stick together, and most of them got pretty deep into the game. Sipe and Nathan being the two, and I, in my opinion, even up until this point, I don't know how you feel about it, I don't actually see Sipe as being one of the Amigos. I just feel like she kind of just tagged along and they brought her in, but Nathan was really the only Amigo that didn't get very deep into the game, and the rest of them were in the final five. Three of them were in the final five, so it was a pretty strong alliance.
This season really did all come through the Saula tribe, really. I mean, the first two episodes, obviously, with Leanne and Paul going out first. And I do wonder, and we discussed this with Jeffrey in one of our previous interviews, how he said that, perhaps had he been tested at Tribal Council earlier in the game and been able to build those relationships, he would have gone further. But because he didn't really have any trust built in through votes, he ultimately screwed him over in the end. And I feel like that's where Saula really bonded. Although even before then, when they came straight to camp, as Leanne said, they all scurried off together and formed an alliance. It was unbreakable. But I think Paul blindside, that was a pretty big blindside for me. But probably the bigger one there was Ting Ting in episode 3. When I first watched that, watching the scene live, I was absolutely shocked by Jark's misplay. I was screaming at the television. I said, what on earth is this guy doing? Playing the idol for himself. I mean, I can understand the paranoia on that island must be so much. But that was a shocking blindside to me, because I was expecting a blindside on someone else and not Ting Ting. Even though it was planned out before, you were expecting that Jark would, I suppose, have the balls to play the idol for Ting Ting. Ultimately, it backfired, and I understand why he played the idol. And I mean, if I was him, I'd rather keep myself safe than everyone else. Especially if you're playing an erratic game like Jark as well. You're always on the target there. But that was a shocking move to me, just to see that misplay. But it did seem that a lot of the cast, and I don't know if this comes back to what we discussed earlier with some of them being recruits there, but a lot of the times when idols came into play, it almost seemed like it was a mark against whoever played them, as opposed to, congratulations, you made a big move. It almost felt as though everyone was scared of people making big moves, and they would really ostracize people for going against this all-knowing Rob who's just running the game nonstop.
Yeah, well, I won't go back into what Laetitia sort of said around what happened with Jark when Jark ended up playing or not playing the idol and outsmarting them, but she does go into a little bit of what happened there as well from her side, because we heard Jark's side of what happened in his interview, and then we heard Laetitia go into a little bit of her side of what she saw as well during that time where he outplayed them. And you're right, it definitely there was a mix of a few different things going on in there, and I don't want to take away from them telling their own story about that. But you're right, it was very interesting in regards to how idols were used in this game for me. The fact that it was always an individual immunity idol that was shared with a bunch of different people that ended up being a tribe immunity idol, and people honestly believing that, you know, Rob would play that idol for them, or Nicole would play that idol, or, you know, I found that just very interesting. It's interesting gameplay, but this type of interesting gameplay can only happen when you've got people who are more recruits that are new to the game, that haven't seen all the worst case scenarios of what would happen if you were to give an idol away. They haven't seen potentially JT getting blindsided by Russell, or, you know, some of the most biggest idol misplays that have happened out there. So I don't fully blame them for it. It made for an exciting season, even though it was hard to analyze it the first time you watched it in regards to where it was going to go towards the end. And I think that like you quite rightfully said, with having so many players here that weren't playing the game in a more standard way of what you'd expect someone to do, it made it really hard for someone like a Mike Fenter as well, who completely misread his own position within the tribe and how well connected he was with the people that he was connected with. He thought that Durao and Nicole was a lot closer to him than what they actually were. It's hard to predict. Like, I think Nicole is actually one of the best players from this season. I don't think she's that. I think that Nicole's only downfall this season is the fact that she wasn't as good at this. Like, she was good at the social, but you know how you get players when they get to the end, they just leave a bad taste in people's mouths because of how they got to the end. That was her. She had that one thing. You need to have like 10 different things right to be a great winner or get the win at the end. And she had that one thing that she, as she blindsided people because she was preaching about being on a moral high ground and being, you know, to a certain standard, people didn't have that sit well with them when she got voted out of the game, where Rob seemed to have had everything that she had, but then also a great social game or great connections with people. He never really wanted to talk himself up to be better than anyone. I mean, it's even something that comes into play at the final tribal council there, where he struggles to elevate his game at the expense of the others that are sitting there, because it's just not in his nature. So he ended up being a more likable person at the end to vote for. I'm not taking away anything on how he played. He played the best game of that season by far, but I feel like Nicole wasn't that far below him in regards to how she played the game. I think that she's a great runner-up. She's someone that if she was to come back and play the game, I'd go as far as to say she would probably have just as big of a target on her back, you know, as Rob would have if he were to come back and play that game. I don't think anybody is going to sleep on her.
Yeah, when I look at the runners-up, at least in International Survivor, Nicole is definitely up the top. And I think her biggest downfall there was playing it was her biggest strength in the game, but also her biggest weakness in the end was she played a very personal game. She brought a lot of stuff from, you know, away from home and really played up that emotional aspect, which is great in building relationships. When you cut someone in the end, it's not pretty. I could see, you know, it was really an instance where the jury was quite bitter, much like a season like All Stars or Samoa, where someone like Rob or Russell has completely burnt the jury, and people do have that bad taste left in the mouth. I'd imagine it would be a hard thing to really balance, because you can't control what happens after someone's voted out, and obviously people talk in Ponderosa and all that as well. I know that Russell is a big proponent of sequestering people individually at Ponderosa, so they can't talk about how they've been screwed over by someone. But I think in this instance, what separates it from a season like All Stars, where Rob was completely ostracized by the jury, is that Rob Bentele, the other player there, I mean, he was really running the game the whole time, but really deflecting the target onto Nicole by making it look like she was cutting everyone. And I think that's what Rob has done best, is building those personal relationships. It almost seemed, though, that if Rob was going to cut them, they understood, and they were almost just giving the game away to Rob at times. Whereas with Nicole, I think because she played up that more emotional aspect and made it really, really personal, I think that might have been what soured people a little bit on her.
I think what really helped Rob out throughout the game is because he had all of that information, right, coming to him at all times. So because he had the information, he always had a good story for why he needed to backstab someone else, because he would know that, for instance, Mike was gunning for him for nearly a week. So by the time that he needed to vote Mike out, he said to Mike, like, listen, I knew you were coming for me. I held on to that information and I was never going to come for you. But because you've come for me, I now have to come for you. So he just had such good social and emotional intelligence when it came to how to deal with people, that I just think that that's that missing. And like, I'm not saying that Nicole doesn't have any emotional intelligence. That's not what I'm trying to say by phrasing it in such a way. But I feel like she just didn't know how to cut people. And like you said, I agree. I think with her, she played the personal card maybe a little bit too much with people. And when you're out there and you're stripped from everything and that you have, you hold on to connections a lot differently. And like I've said it here before, when you go out to do like heavy Navy SEAL army training, there's a brotherhood that gets created out there with the people that are suffering with you. And I think that with Survivor, it's actually similar to that type of training to a certain degree, because you're out there deprived of food, you're not sleeping well, you're relying on the person next to you to get to day 2, and at points it feels like you're at war, and people are coming for your head. So you just bond with people at a different level compared to what you would bond with someone over 39 days in your everyday life if you were to go out to a nice cozy hotel somewhere in Hawaii or something like that. It's a different level of connections that get created. Now, one of the other things I wanted to touch on with this season, as well as we touched on the fact that there were a few different twists. There was an interesting theme, which I agree with you. It's kind of mimicked Ghost Island to a certain degree. What did you think of the actual twists that we saw in regards to the 4 immunity idols, that individual immunity idols that came up at one point, and the vote nullifier probably being 2 of the bigger, newer type of twists that we haven't seen yet in a Survivor season?
Yeah, well, I think Island of Secrets has done any other island twist better than really US or Australian Survivor seasons. Ghost Island, you look at that season where they had, you'd smash the urn and it'd say, sorry, no game for you today, maybe next time. It felt a bit repetitive, whereas Island of Secrets, every time someone would go there, it felt like, there were different twists up for grabs. And I think also a strength with Island of Secrets is you got to see people suffer as well. Maybe that's a benefit of South African Survivor having a much longer runtime, is seeing those people suffer and getting more time with them on the Island of Secrets to see how they react to being out of the game. I do like one thing that they did a lot of the time was people wouldn't return from Island of Secrets until tribal council in some instances, or right after the immunity challenge. So we saw there with a player like Nicole, who came back to camp, and she said to Rob, well, how did this plan come about? I think it was in regard, it must have been the Mamba vote, I think.
Sipe. It was the Sipe.
Yeah, Sipe vote. Yeah, and just seeing her react and come back to camp, it was a little bit more interesting, I suppose, whereas in the past, other seasons have had it before the reward challenge, or in between the reward and immunity challenge. They come back to camp and then they go to the immunity challenge there. So to see people sometimes skipping tribal council or coming back from Island of Secrets after a day or 2 and then going to tribal council without any prior plans in place and seeing how they adjust there was an interesting to see. But to your point there, the range of different advantages, this is something that South African Survivor do so well. I think because they're willing to experiment a little bit more, whereas US Survivor probably are a little bit more hesitant. Maybe, again, it also relates to the fact that US Survivor obviously filming 2 seasons a year, whereas Survivor South Africa have that more time to plan it out. But I do like things like the vote nullifier. Again, the idol in the urn. You look at the previous season, Philippines, and this came into play in Winners at War as well, with the idol on the podium. I think South African Survivor are a lot more intuitive and creative in terms of creating new twists and advantages, and that is something I really liked. Just going to Island Secrets, having different options, like Tanya not being able to having the option to go to tribal council and solidify those bonds, or to pick your next tribe at the swap there. It gives the players more power. I do think, though, perhaps the biggest downfall from having all these advantages, though, when it came down to the final 5 there with that Steffi vote out, it very well could have been that everyone was safe and we didn't have a vote in the end. I think that's a big danger of a season like Island of Secrets, is if people hold all their idols, like someone like Ty has done in the past, then eventually it all catches up to you, and you might have an end game where everyone has an idol, and you get Sareed, or in this case, Steffied on this season.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but I would hope that production keeps a track of how many people have got clues and advantages and things like that, and they would amend the game in accordance to that, so that that the situation that you just mentioned would never happen with everybody having an advantage.
Had Mumba or Jark not been voted out, though, we would have had 4 idols at the final 4, and obviously, if say someone like Steffi had won the individual immunity, then there will be 5 people immune. So it really was a possibility. Literally only a couple episodes earlier, because at that time, I think Mumba had the idol, Jark had the idol, Rob obviously had the idol, and I think we also saw Laetitia found the idol around that time as well. So there were a lot of idols in play, and obviously individual immunity. So it was a problem at a time, but I think they did get lucky that obviously Mumba and Jark got voted out. It did seem that it could have been a problem at the time.
So the Laetitia idol, that one is the Jark idol that got replanted. Yeah. So Jark's idol wouldn't have gotten there, but I hear what you're saying. It is a concern to have that many advantages that late in the game. I don't like it, even though we didn't see everybody whip out an advantage that kept them in the game. We still saw Steffi go home in the same fashion that Sareed went home. Like, we know she would have gone home regardless, but it's still crazy to me to think that at a final 5, someone has gotten all the way to the final 5, and the only reason that they potentially could get voted out is because they don't have an advantage or an idol in the game. I understand that you have to push to get that.
That's what I don't like about US Survivor, though, is you get players like Ben or Devons who really just find all these idols and really idle their way to the end. And then at the end of the day, you get the super fans saying, well, they don't deserve to be here because they've been relying on advantages all the time, which is a little bit hypocritical, but that's a story for another day there. But I do think that Survivor, with all these advantages these days, and particularly a twist like Island of Secrets, or also Immunity Island this next season coming up, I do prefer to see idols expire a lot earlier in the game. Perhaps final 6, and then it gives players who have perhaps relied on idols and advantages all the way through that legitimacy to then fight their way to the end. They may well still be able to get to the end by winning individual immunities, but it does give a little bit more legitimacy, where you can't have a player that just idles their way to the final 4, wins at fire, and then goes to the final 3 and goes on to win. It gives you more options to really fight your way to the end, and again, it avoids a scenario like what happened with Steffi there, where you get people that are all immune and then one person has to go home in the end. It does add a lot more options, I suppose, for that social and strategic gameplay to come in at the end of the game.
The one thing I will add to having, because we know that the new season in Survivor South Africa will be Immunity Island, and we won't go into that now because we've got a whole other podcast that's coming up next weekend where we will be talking about the things that we'd like to see in Immunity Island, and we'll be doing some predictions on what it potentially could mean and talk about a bunch of hypotheticals there. But one of the things that I would like to see more of with a twist like this island is more decisions needed to be made, like getting people onto the island, having to make decisions. Like, I like the Tanya one where she could choose which tribe she goes to. Maybe next season we get an opportunity where someone goes there and they can do a mutiny if they are in a bad spot, things like that, where players can take the game into their own hands. It doesn't always necessarily need to be an advantage or like an idol or something like that, but it could just be something as simple as you've got the power to go to another tribe and you can take someone with you, and then because you're going to that tribe, you could, 2 other people have to go to the other tribe or something like that. There's other creative things that we can do with this twist, but I agree with you. I do like the island theme within the South African Survivor sort of franchise at this stage. I'm hoping that with Immunity Island, when you hear the words Immunity Island, that they haven't gone overboard with what that is going to mean in the actual game when we get into that. Now, Riley, we've spoken a lot about the Island of Secrets. It's been great recapping this whole season with you, and looking again at one of the best people to have ever won this game, and Rob Bentele, who takes it home at the end of the day here. Do you have any final thoughts on Survivor Island of Secrets? Anything that you wanted to say here before we sort of close the book on Survivor Island of Secrets as we start to shift our attention to the new season?
Yeah, I suppose the closing remarks from Islander Secrets is just the strength of the cast. So many players I'd love to see return. Obviously, Rob Bentele being not only, in my opinion, the greatest winner in Survivor South Africa, but perhaps in terms of Survivor as a whole around the world, including US Survivor, he's definitely up there in the top tier, up with a player like a Tony or a Boston Rob in Redemption Island. And he did take a lot of those attributes from someone like Boston Rob and adapted that to the season. But looking at the cast, even some pre-merge characters like your Tanyas and your Roccos, people I'd like to see come back. And then obviously people like Jark and Dante, who they didn't have the opportunity to maneuver too much in the game because they were always on the bottom. But even those players like Rob, Steffi, and Nicole, to see how they come back in a potential All-Star season in the future. How would they jibe? Would they still be? Would Steffi still be close with Rob and Nicole there? Would she trust them, knowing that they backstabbed her in the past? There are a lot of players on this season that I really want to see back. Probably even half the cast. Just such great characters. Even Laetitia, someone who came into the game as the old, the mother of the tribe, I suppose. And she really learned how to play the game, started making moves, and played a very strategy-heavy game toward the end there, finding those idols and all that. Even to see someone like her come back and see how she adapts to the game. I do like with Survivor South Africa how they do have people from different age ranges as well. I think that's a strength of Survivor South Africa is they do bring in people who are as young as someone like Mike, or in the previous season, the blonde lady on the previous season, and then obviously up to someone like Laetitia being nearly 60 years old. Seeing how they interact is something that's so great on a season like this. Whereas I know in US Survivor they really rely on people that are in that sort of late 20s to early 30s period there. So yeah, seeing how someone like Laetitia or Sipe or Tanya interact with the younger people like your Mikes, really entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, she mentioned it in the interview as well. 35-year difference between her and the next oldest person in the cast. So that's pretty impressive stuff from her. And one of the things that she did extremely well, which I told her as well when she was on the show, is that she wasn't putting those barriers in front of herself saying, I'm not willing to be this or that while I'm out there. She actually molded, if they wanted her to be the grandmother or the mother there, she kind of molded to what they wanted her to be. And I feel like playing into people's perceptions on a game like Survivor is so important. And it's something that she did extremely well. And I agree with you. So many good characters. It's what made the season for me as a casual fan. We've determined I'm a casual fan now because of the fact that I like characters. I like Rick Devens. I like Russell Hunt. So there's a lot of similarities between me and casual fans. But as someone that enjoys the big characters, I really enjoyed this season. And I thought there were a lot of big characters that I would personally love to see come back and play this game again. And we will have a tough time on our hands, Riley, when we get back in the off season after season 8 Survivor South Africa Island of Immunity, or Immunity Island. We're going to have to try and see if we can come up with what an all-star season should look like with a lot of these players. And I've got a feeling there will be a bit of debate between who we should leave out and who should come back from this season, because obviously we would try and make it as diverse as possible throughout all of the different seasons to have some representation, but it's going to be tough to only choose maybe like 5 players from this season.
Yeah, very much like a season like Cagayan. One thing I do want to discuss just quickly is the casting divisions at the beginning of the game. I feel like that was a little bit of a misstep in that regard. We did discuss this in the first episode with Leanne and Nicole knowing each other previously, and also having Steffi on that tribe as well. I feel like that probably could have been better thought out by production. I do like, though, that they've experimented with 21 players. It's something we very rarely see. There was obviously a little bit of a discrepancy there with 11 men and 10 women, not as equal as 50-50. But I do like how they played around with that, and it obviously gives them more room to play around with episode wise. But also, we did get to know all these players very closely. I really, when I look back, the only player we didn't really get to know was Rose Lee. And other than that, I mean, a lot of these characters were fleshed out throughout the season. Jeffrey as well, maybe someone that wasn't focused on as much, unfortunately. But you look across the whole season, even though it was the Rob show, a lot of the times we did get to know all these characters throughout the season. Sometimes only over a couple episodes toward the end of their season. But I feel like if you ask me about any of these players, I could tell you a lot about them just because we've spent so much time with them. Whereas on other seasons, and I look at Australian Survivor as an example, where you don't get to know anyone until they get voted out. And even then, sometimes you don't know who they were. So I feel like with Survivor South Africa, especially, we do get a lot more background on these players, which I really like to see. Because, yeah, as I said, 20 out of 21 people here, I think we really got to know them other than Rosalie.
You said a lot there, but I want to touch on the specific bit about the edit and seeing the players on the show. I found myself when we were doing these early interviews with the likes of your Pauls, your Leannes, your Ting Tings, Meryl, all of these people. As I was talking to them, I'm like, I know I wouldn't mind to see you back on the show again. And the reason that I wouldn't mind to see some of these people back on the show again is because of the edit and the fact that we got to know them. So I kind of felt like I knew them to a certain degree. I felt like some of them had more potential, they had more to give, and their journey was cut short. So they made us feel a certain way about these players that other seasons, like you said, the US definitely, I think Australia isn't as bad as the US, but the US season specifically these days, they don't care to showcase more than maybe 3, 4, 5 players max in a season that they really showcase. And the rest of them are just like wallpaper in the background, kind of like the Fiji beach that we've gotten so used to. They're kind of similar to that. But, I do really appreciate that. And if Leroux Botha and anybody's actually listening to this up until this point of the podcast, and if they hear this, I hope you guys never change that. I hope you continue to give us a lot with all of the characters in the show. We understand that you've got to tell the story of the winner. We understand that comes into play, but the balance on Survivor Island of Secrets should be looked at as a great balance for telling a story about the winner and the people who got to the end, but also not neglecting, because like myself and Riley kept saying more than once here, if we had a counter on how many times we mentioned the cast, I bet you it would be like plus 22 or something for that. And then the next best thing of Island of Secrets would probably have been mentioned 10 times. It's not even close. It's the cast really is what made us love this season. And we're hoping that the next season is going to be just as good as this. And I do agree. It's something that I wrote down, and we didn't talk about the fact that we had 21 on there. I didn't mind it. It's interesting. You're right. It is unfair, the balance between the women and men to a certain degree, but it was an interesting theme to had 3 tribes of 7. And I kind of feel like you could look at that as a potential model for what we could see in a season like US, Australia, South Africa. If they were ever to play together, you could have 3 tribes of 7. I wouldn't even be against them just going full out and doing 8 in each one and just having it to up to that many people playing. But at the end of the day, this has been a good season. I've been really enjoying talking about it every week with you. I'm really looking forward to the next season, which I'm really excited about. I know you're really excited about that. So for anyone that is listening, please join us next week. We're going to start doing these recaps at the same time every weekend, which should be 8 p.m. over in the US Eastern Standard Time. It should be at 12 p.m. New Zealand time. It's going to be 2 a.m. sadly in South Africa in the mornings on a Saturday morning where we're going to do these recaps. So we don't expect to have a lot of South Africans being up at that point looking and watching at this live. But first thing on that Saturday morning when you get up and you have your morning coffee and you have a brekkie, you'll have myself and Riley there talking about what we saw on Survivor Immunity Island. And then in the Australian side of the world, for the Eastern board, that should be around 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning that you should be able to see that. And it's going to be a bit earlier if you're over in Western Australia. But, I know that it's going to be a great season. I'm looking forward to it. And if you've come up to this point and you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe, give us a like, all of those good stuff to help us get noticed and get up in that Google Analytics and get recognized a little bit more as a podcast. The more people that watch this, the more things we can do moving forward. So we're really excited about that. Nearly 750 subscribers now, Riley. We're on the up and up.
Getting close to 1,000, but absolutely. Check out some of our other videos as well. The Immunity Island cast assessment. That was great fun doing that with you and really dissecting the cast. And then, as you said, next week we'll go through this twist a little bit more, give our thoughts on it. I'm really excited to have Survivor back. I was looking at it the other day and thinking we get Survivor South Africa back next week and then Australian Survivor immediately after that and then US Survivor. So we're going to be all survived out in a couple of months, but I'm really looking forward to it.
Me and you are going to have to live on caffeine, watching all the shows and analyzing everything. But it's going to be a lot of fun. I think we've had a long time without watching Survivor, so we're all very excited about that. Guys, it's been great having you on the show and listening to us. We will catch you next time. Bye.